Oh my god, it is so good to be back! So, Sonic Mania. Let's talk about that. The hype surrounding this game was absolutely insane when it was announced. No one, and I mean no one, was expecting Sega to announce a brand new 2D Sonic game in 2017, let alone a brand new 2D Sonic game that was being made as a direct successor to Sonic 3. Bear in mind, this was mid-2010 Sega we're talking about here. The same Sega that had released Sonic Lost World and Sonic Boom, the latter of which had almost killed the franchise. And I don't think I need to remind people of the last time they announced a supposed sequel to the classic Sonic games with Sonic 4. It's safe to say that initially, a lot of people were quite skeptical. That was until it was revealed who was working on this new game. Christian Whitehead and Simon Tomley, better known as Taxman and Stealth. These guys had played pivotal roles in the mobile ports for Sonic 1, 2, and CD, so to see them spearhead a brand new classic Sonic game was insane. Of course, they weren't the only ones working on the game, as Pagoda West Games was also brought in to help out with development, later followed up by Hyperkinetic Studios to work on the Plus DLC, which I'll be talking about later on in the video. Needless to say, everyone was incredibly excited for the August 15th release date for Sonic Mania, unless you were getting the game on Steam, which had been delayed to the 29th to add de novo DRM on release, which was cracked just 8 days after launch. Mini history lesson aside, I didn't know about any of that at the time. Bear in mind, I was just some Sonic-obsessed 12-year-old whose hyperfixation on the series only got worse as soon as this game dropped. I wonder why I was bullied so much as a kid. All I knew about this game was that it was a brand new 2D Sonic game, and that's it. In fact, when I first saw the pre-order trailer, I thought it was a Sonic fan game. Bear in mind, again, I was a Sonic-obsessed 12-year-old, so me going down the long rabbit hole of Sonic fan games and hearing about games such as Sonic Time Twisted by Overbound Games and Sonic Before and After the sequel by Lake Feppard was pretty much inevitable. Can you really blame me for thinking this was a long-awaited passion project? I mean, yeah, but in my stupid kid brain, I thought that Sega's use of classic Sonic and Sonic Generations was a one-time thing. Again, after Sega had released questionable games such as Sonic 4, Sonic Lost World, and Sonic Boom, my faith in Sega was pretty much gone at that point. I genuinely didn't think they would make something that was good after Sonic Generations at the time. By all means, I loved Sonic, but I wasn't expecting them to make a new 2D Sonic game in the style of the Genesis games. So when I found out that the trailer for that, quote, fan project wasn't a fan project, but something that was going up on the PlayStation Store for about $20 and you could pre-order it, yeah, you bet your ass I was on that shit. I remember being so disappointed that the game was released on the same day I was returning to school that year, but the second I got home, I immediately took over my family's PlayStation 4 and experienced the better of the two Sonic games that had been released. And just a year later, when the Plus DLC was announced and it was revealed that Mighty and Ray, two characters that hadn't been seen in decades, were returning, I was excited for the game all over again. Anyways, what's the story of this game here? What's the plot? Well, sometime after the events of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Eggman picks up a strange energy signature different from that of the Chaos Emeralds on the coast of Angel Island. Piquing his interest, Eggman immediately sends out 5 egg robos to investigate. Meanwhile, Sonic and Tails picked up the same energy signature and went to Angel Island to check it out for themselves. However, they were too little too late, as Sonic and Tails arrive on the Angel Island just in time to witness Eggman's robots dig up the source of the signature, the Phantom Ruby. Upon being extracted from the ground, Sonic, Tails, the Egg Robos, and the nearby Knuckles get warped to Green Hill with the Phantom Ruby's power, the Egg Robos themselves being transformed into the hard-boiled heavies. Now with the power of the Phantom Ruby, Eggman converts Little Planet into the roboticized hellscape it was before Sonic intervened and begins constructing his latest weapon, Titanic Monarch. Now it's up to Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles to retrieve the Chaos Emeralds, take down the hard-boiled heavies, and put an end to Eggman's schemes once again. Alright, I have some thoughts about this story, actually. So it's alright, I guess. I sort of feel like everything's a bit of a mess here. Why didn't Eggman or Tails pick up the Phantom Ruby signal in Sonic 3? It's implied that it could be more powerful than the Master Emerald, so surely at least one of them would have picked up the Ruby's energy signature, right? Another thing, we're going all over the place in this game. Locations new and old, mostly old, by the way. Of the 13 zones in the game, 8 of them are from previous Sonic games. I understand that this is an anniversary title and all. It's meant to celebrate the series' history, but it really does just sort of make the story feel all over the place to me, given that you're going from disconnected location to disconnected location so frequently. Ultimately, the story still serves its purpose. Give Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles a reason to kick Eggman's ass and have 5 new marketing opportunities. Besides, I can't imagine it would have been easy to write anything more coherent than this. The team was working under the restrictions they had, however messy of a final product it turned out to be. That said, the plot, while not bad per se, is certainly just a little bit sloppy. But I can set a somewhat sloppy but serviceable story aside for the sake of the gameplay. So let's get into that. Everything here is basically upping Sonic 3's formula. You can play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or Sonic and Tails together, all three of them having their own respective abilities, of course. Tails can fly, Knuckles can glide, climb walls, and break through walls without needing to rev up a spin dash, and he even has his own roots, although they're not nearly to the scale of the roots from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. He does get his own unique act in Mirage Saloon Zone when the poor guy gets hit off the tornado, though. Playing as Sonic and Tails together will allow you to have Tails airlift Sonic by holding up on the D-pad and mashing the jump button, although it's basically impossible to do if you have a fire shield. And as for Sonic himself, he's finally stopped pathologically lying to young children! Instead, he's got the all-new drop dash. I love this thing to bits. Basically, after you jump, you can press and hold the jump button again in order to rev up a weak spin dash that activates when Sonic hits the ground. It was designed for speedrunning, and it really helps give Sonic's playstyle a sense of flow. Of course, I'm sure some people really enjoyed the peel-out from Sonic CD, or actually liked being lied to for some reason, and thankfully, old habits die hard. Yep, you can use the movesets from Sonic CD or Sonic 3 over using the drop dash if that's what you'd prefer, although for some reason you can't use all three of them at once in normal play. Maybe it was done for balance reasons, since you can actually use all three by channeling the power of bad line reads and entering 9001 in the secret level select, but by doing that you're forfeiting the ability to save the game since you can only do that in no save mode. It's just a minor nitpick, but it still does strike me as odd. Moving onward, the level design is basically Sonic 3's level design theory, refined just a little further. I'm not gonna bother talking about the basics. Momentum-based gameplay, spin dash, jump, yada yada, I don't need to patronize you. As with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, there's plenty of places to explore, loads of goodies to collect, and a real sense of speed and flow. These levels are fantastic and huge, maybe a bit too huge sometimes. That may have been me taking longer routes though. Of course, scattered across the levels are star posts, the checkpoints of the game, and if you cross one with enough rings, stars will spin around the top, allowing you to enter the bonus stages. This time the bonus stages are... right. Already got all of the gold medals when I purchased the Plus DLC. Hold on, let me just... Alright, much better. This time the bonus stages are the Blue Sphere stages from Sonic 3. Yeah, that's all I have to say. You don't get any bonus rings or power-ups here, just silver or gold medals that unlock the bonus content of the game. Other than that, it's Blue Spheres exactly as you remember it. Please ignore the sped-up B-roll. I'm a little disappointed, to be honest. There really isn't much of a reason to go here after you got all of the bonus content. I mean, the content's good, an extra Blue Spheres mode that should probably have a level select, some Mean Bean Machine or Puyo Puyo if you're something recurring gag, the DA Garden, those movesets I was talking about earlier, an Knuckles mode, debug mode. Lots of fun stuff, sure, but nothing that helps you in the moment. You're not gonna jump in one of these and come out with 100 more rings or any of the returning elemental shields. However, assuming you have the Plus DLC, once you get all of the gold medals from the Blue Spheres bonus stages, you'll actually unlock this neat little pinball game that's... also a little disappointing. I mean, I like the concept, being in this great big pinball machine that once you reach the top lets you play a crane minigame that lets you snag some extra rings, lives, and shields, but I didn't really find myself that engaged with it, if I'll be honest. I think a big part of the problem is that there's only one pinball table in the whole game. Just one, that's all you get. And the design isn't all that engaging either. I mean, I understand that the DLC that even unlocks this to begin with is only around $5, but they seriously couldn't afford to, I don't know, at least randomize the 3 segments of the pinball table? Maybe if that was too clunky, make like 1 or 2 extra tables? It doesn't have to be too big, even if it's the same minigame, it's just up to designing a new table or two, and maybe some light palette swapping to keep it visually interesting. I already know a good strategy to just basically stay in the table forever. At least in Sonic 3's minigames, those had what was essentially a soft time limit. You'd eventually get forced out of the bonus stage due to how they were designed. And the crane part of the minigame isn't very hard once you realize you just have to aim one space behind the object you want. I know that I might be coming off as a bit harsh with these 2 bonus stages, but the truth is they're both great. One's a classic minigame that's pretty damn iconic to the Sonic series as a whole, and the other just needed a little more work to be truly spectacular. I don't dislike these bonus stages, I feel like they're serviceable, they're just not my favorite bonus stages when compared to Sonic 3's on both a design level and a variety level. Moving on from the bonus stages to the special stages, we've got probably one of the best special stages in the classic Sonic games, accessed the same way as the ones in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. This time you're chasing after a UFO with one of the emeralds along a track, with you needing to collect rings to stay in the special stage and blue spheres that cause you to speed up. The faster you go, the harder it is to steer, increasing the risk of you falling out of the stage when the track isn't guarded by bumpers. I gotta say, I adore these special stages. It can get seriously tense, just barely clinging onto the edge of a platform when making a jump, or snagging just a couple more rings to keep you on the stage for just a little longer. Needing to balance collecting rings and collecting blue spheres to speed up is such an amazing idea, and I genuinely think that these special stages are the best ones in the classic Sonic series. And the visuals too. I adore low poly aesthetics, I eat that shit up, and to see the special stages and the special stage rings themselves go for the Sega Saturn-esque feel is just beautiful. But I'll have plenty of time to gush about the visuals later. As always, collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds unlocks super forms for the cast. Tails included too. Super transformations are now activated by pressing a separate button after jumping, allowing you to use your character's mid-air ability, which is a well-needed change. I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed to see that we don't have hyperforms in the game this time around. I mean, I know they were planned to be in the game and the series director still doesn't like hyperforms for some reason, but I think it would have been nice to see them return, especially in the game that's supposed to be celebrating classic Sonic as a whole. Moving on to power-ups, we've actually seen a return of the elemental shields alongside the normal shield from Sonic 1 and 2. Of course, we've also got the extra life monitor, speed shoes monitor, invincibility monitor, and the ring monitor, all of which are returning from previous games. There's also a rework of a power-up called the Combi Ring, which combines all of the rings you've collected into a couple of large rings, making it easier to recollect them. This one's actually from Knuckles Chaotix, although there it combined all of your rings into one giant ring that you could recollect. I think they did it a little better in Mania personally. Makes it a little harder to instantly recollect all of your rings. As for the elemental shields themselves, all 3 act as they did in Sonic 3. Mid-air dash and fire immunity for the fire shield, water breathing and ground bounce for the bubble shield, and double jumping, ring attraction, and electrical immunity for the lightning shield. This time though, the shields actually play a little bit of a role in the level environment too. For example, the bubble shield, never mind, scrap that one, but the fire shield can light these bridges in Green Hill on fire, as well as the oil in Oil Ocean. As for the lightning shield, Flying Battery Zone has these electromagnets that attract whoever you're playing as to them if you have one, causing a pseudo anti-gravity gimmick to be present in its stages. It's mostly for flair of course, but the fact that a shield you have could slightly change how you go about a zone is actually an amazing idea. And on the subject of zones, let's talk about those. As I said earlier, of the 13 zones in the game, only about 5 of the stages are brand new, and that's including the secret zone, by the way. Despite this, the other 8 stages that are reused, Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Flying Battery, Stardust Speedway, Hydrocity, Oil Ocean, Lava Reef, and Metallic Madness all actually feel fairly fresh and exciting. This is because all the stages have been remixed to some degree. For example, Chemical Plant has these giant syringes that make the chemicals bouncy. Flying Battery has elements of Wacky Workbench, and the big one, Metallic Madness, has had its stage gimmick fully realized from Sonic CD, and has these segments where you jump into the background similar to that one Virtual Boy Wario game that I still need to play. And as for the new stages, all of them, no wait, not the secret stage, almost all of them are incredible. Studiopolis, Press Garden, Mirage Saloon, and Titanic Monarch are all incredibly memorable and managed to fit in perfectly with the lineup of past stages. They all also either have their own unique gimmicks or borrow a mechanic from a previous game, while still putting their own spin on things to make them all stand out. Press Garden and Mirage Saloon are my favorites aesthetics-wise. For Press Garden, a printing factory on the inside and a winter wonderland on the outside, complete with wood chippers and pink-leafed trees. And Mirage Saloon Zone, a wouldn't you know it, in the middle of the desert, complete with star-shaped pinatas, pistols that launch you across the stage, and seltzer bottles that temporarily create pathways to run on. I adore the visuals of both of those stages. As a matter of fact, now that we're on the subject, the presentation of this game in general is outstanding. There's so much here to enjoy throughout the whole game, from the 2D sprite work to the animation, the attention to detail. Oh my god, the artists and art directors hit it out of the fucking park with this game. Everything is just so colorful, but not too colorful like Sonic CD could sometimes be. Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Mighty, Ray, all 5 of them look fantastic. Although, I will admit, I'm one of those weirdos that prefers Sonic 3's design for Sonic. And I'm not too big of a fan of Sonic being a lighter shade of blue. Yeah, well, that's just me nitpicking. Santiago looking ass. Is that meme still relevant? Oh wait, that's right, I don't care. And I've already gushed a bit about the special stage visuals, but again, I adore the low poly Sega Saturn-like graphics there. I am an absolute sucker for low poly aesthetics. I grew up on older games with limited graphics, so I guess I'm a little biased. It genuinely does make me wonder if it would ever be possible to port at least the special stages themselves onto a Sega Saturn. I mean, I seriously doubt it, but it's an interesting thought. Reminds me a little of Nights into Dreams if anyone watching's played that. And then there's the opening cutscene you get while waiting on the title screen, directed by Tyson Hess. This is the level of animation I hope to reach myself one day. It seriously just captures everything that the Japanese covers had in stunning, fluid, 2D animation. And of course, let's not forget about the music. God, the music of Sonic Mania is absolutely incredible. Composed by T. Lopes and mixed by, letting Google translate the name because fuck saying that.
Fako Young.
Yeah, that guy. Every track, and I mean every track, is a certified banger in my book. From revitalized classics to totally unique originals, Sonic Mania has it all when it comes to music. I can't state enough how amazing of a job T. Lopes did with Sonic Mania's OST. Likewise with the artists, animators, and designers. There is passion oozing out of every seam of this game, and you can easily tell that everyone on the team, to some degree, was a Sonic fan. Maybe a bit too easy. Okay, yeah, this is a segue into my personal little nitpicks and actual problems with the game, since believe it or not, Sonic Mania isn't a perfect game. I'm made of paper. That's better. Yeah, I do actually have a couple of little nitpicks and genuine criticisms with the game. Namely, how much it actually draws from previous Sonic games and external niche references. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love a To Be This Good takes ages here and a Genesis does there, maybe sprinkle in a few Knuckles Chaotix and Game Gear Sonic games references to taste. But I do personally think that the references in the game are a little bit heavy-handed at times. I understand that the game's slogan was "By the Mania, for the Mania," but come on. When you're in the middle of a Sonic game and all of a sudden you get dropped into a quick game of Puyo Puyo, it's a little heavy-handed. And yeah, I get why I'm in the middle of a game of Puyo Puyo. That's a reference to Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, one of the many ways Puyo Puyo was localized in the West, and in this case it doubled as a tie-in game to the adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, which was a Saturday morning cartoon that ran in the 90s. But I don't think most people are going to know about almost any of that, especially for just some random Joe who's never heard of Sonic before. And I'm not saying that this game is absolutely unplayable if you're not a Sonic fan, not at all. But what I am saying is this game is definitely targeted towards folks like me, people who have grown up with the franchise and even researched it for one reason or another. And again, I'm not saying I don't like the references, not at all. In fact, as a massive Sonic fan, I love them. The small nods to Knuckles Chaotix with the Combi Catcher and Metal Sonic Kai, the Game Gear references with the damaged Metal Sonics and Silver Sonics in the Metal Sonic boss fight. I ate that shit up when I first played the game, and I still do as a young adult. But I'm also trying my best to look through the lens of someone who doesn't know what the fuck a Sonic is. I can imagine myself having a good time, but I don't think I'd enjoy the game as much because I'm missing some crucial context. As much of an amazing game Sonic Mania is because of it being spearheaded by people with this much passion for the franchise, it's for that same reason that Sonic Mania has this somewhat glaring flaw. Ultimately, this is just me trying to look at the game through multiple points of view. Is Sonic Mania a bad game for this? Hell no, were you even paying attention? The level designs, the art, the music, the special stages, the extra content, Sonic Mania is a fantastic game. I just feel like some of its identity clings to the past of what made Sonic good, of what made Sega good. It just leans a little too heavy into the references sometimes, but even so, I think that Sonic Mania, on a gameplay level, is one of those games that literally anyone can pick up and have a good time with. Now that my biggest nitpick is out of the way, the bosses. I have my own opinions on some of them. They're alright for the most part. They get really creative with what they do, but sometimes I do feel like they lean a little into the, "Oh, this is my damage window. Oh, you missed it." You know? They can go on for a little bit longer than I like my Sonic bosses to go. For example, Hydrocity Act 2's boss. It's a little sluggish, but ultimately it's quite fun. You gotta dodge oncoming debris while trying to activate mines to get air and damage Eggman, who's chasing you down these canals. But once you take him down, his second phase begins, and it's just the Hydrocity Act 1 boss from Sonic 3, that you have to hit 8 times. Again. Metallic Madness's Act 1 boss basically lifts Sonic 1's final boss, which comes with all the flaws of the Sonic 1 final boss. At least it was in a fitting location this time, I'll give him credit there. Studiopolis Act 1's boss I'm actually okay with, since it's being done more so for spectacle, but you get the general idea. Some of the bosses in the game, while quite memorable, just sort of lean a little into that annoying "you can only attack me when I say you can" thing that Sonic doesn't usually do. Anyways, I'm pretty sure I've said all I've had to say about the negatives here. Not much to go over, really. So how about we talk about the final stages of the game, eh? After you reach the end of Metallic Madness, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles look outside to see it. Eggman's latest creation, Titanic Monarch. Starting out with Act 1, we start out scaling up this giant robot seen in the background, climbing up its heavily defended scaffolding. Yeah, Titanic Monarch is right. This thing is bigger than anything we've seen Eggman successfully build up to this point from a timeline perspective, outside of the modifications on Little Planet and the Death Egg. The act itself is huge too, only beaten in size by Act 2. It's made all the more foreboding with the music in the background. In some areas it feels like it's trying to be hopeful, even using what sounds like the beginning of the end credits theme from Sonic's CD after Sonic's freed Little Planet. The sheer size of Titanic Monarch immediately represses all of that hope. Maybe Little Planet itself is calling out to Sonic, pleading for help once more. However it is you interpret it, the tone is pretty clear. The gimmicks in Act 1 and 2 are actually quite fun, taking this from the Death Egg and the Glowing Spheres minigame from Sonic 3. That one was always my favorite, and I'm glad that they actually somewhat made a return in an actual stage. The boss here can be somewhat RNG. It's pretty much a modified version of the Red Eye boss from Sonic 3's Death Egg Zone, with the RNG coming in the second phase with the elevator. The elevator has a chance to either rise or fall, changing Sonic's jump height, as well as the position of the boss's landing and the direction it fires. Act 2 is more of the same, this time being inside the machine itself, the music doubling down on the initial tone, Sonic and his friends now closer to Eggman than ever, ready to clash at any moment. It's actually quite impressive how the music here both acts as a climax piece and an intermission piece. The background of the stage seems to have stained glass windows of the hard-boiled heavies alongside the Phantom Ruby, going for a sort of false god aesthetic here I see. Is Eggman worshipping the Phantom Ruby now or something? If I recall, I remember hearing somewhere that throughout the events of Sonic Mania, Eggman's exposure to the Phantom Ruby was actually causing him to slowly lose his sanity, which, if we're going off of the interpretation from that of which shall not be named, actually has some ground to stand on. Makes me wonder if he's starting to see the Phantom Ruby as a god of some kind, as his sanity dwindles or something like that. The stage itself is the biggest in the game. It starts out very straightforward until you get teleported to this foyer-esque area. To move forward, you have to go through 4 other segments of the stage. It's solid, I guess. Maybe it's supposed to be sapping the machine of the Phantom Ruby's power? That aside, the gimmicks are all the same. Plasma globes, those bumper things, these poles, the badniks, you get it. The other 4 sections of the stage have this teleportation gimmick in place of things like bottomless pits, which is honestly much better than forcing the player to restart in such a massive stage, not gonna lie. And as for the final boss, real quick, spoiler warning, skip to the timestamp on screen in 3, 2, 1, quick default reference pose I use for camera alignment. Okay, we cool? Good. I understand that not everybody really cares about spoilers, especially for a Sonic game that's about 7 years old and all, but I don't know. I guess I just don't want to potentially rob people of the experience of getting to the ending of the games themselves. It's a lot more rewarding getting there yourself, you know? Anyways, where was I? Ah, right, final boss. Ugh, damn remote. Maybe it needs new batteries or something. Anyways, once you get all 4 segments completed, a portal opens up that leads Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles straight to Eggman. All of the monitors in the background light up as Eggman sits in a machine that can harness the power of the Phantom Ruby, the Phantom Egg, and the semi-final fight begins. The boss is serviceable. I didn't really get any sense of intimidation like I did with the previous classic Sonic games, 1 and CD aside. I don't know, I guess I was expecting something more grand, something a little more intimidating. This is literally just an egg. I could make an interdimensional omelet with this thing. maybe they were going for something a little more light-hearted, given that the Phantom Egg literally cracks open once you beat it without the Chaos Emeralds. Besides, I suppose it does actually allow room for the whole deal of silly thing actually being really powerful, thus making it more intimidating. That said, I do find the boss fun to fight, and overall, it's a pretty solid concept. Eggman surrounding himself with a shield that even super forms can't break through, showing just how powerful the Ruby really is, all the while sending you off to fight Heavy Gunner, Heavy Shinobi, Heavy Magician, and Heavy Rider, before pulling you back in to fight him again, only to immediately drop down to get some damage in himself, not realizing that in redirecting the power to the cables, he's gotten rid of his shield, leaving him wide open to attack. He'll also occasionally launch a volley of 4 missiles at the player. As the fight progresses, Eggman will gradually lose cables, making it easier to hit him. I'm alright with that, although I will admit I prefer to see bosses get tougher as the fight progresses. As Sonic lands the final blow to the Phantom Egg, Titanic Monarch begins to go up in flames, and before he can escape, the Phantom Ruby goes haywire, sending Sonic, Eggman, and Heavy King somewhere outside of time and space. Welcome to Egg Reverie Zone, where the true final boss of the game lies. A 3-way struggle for the Phantom Ruby breaks out between Sonic, Eggman, and Heavy King. Let's start with the positives. Both the concept and the music are incredible. Stuck outside of time and space, the only thing keeping Sonic alive being the Chaos Emeralds, and the music just cheering you on as you fight Heavy King and Eggman over the Phantom Ruby is simply amazing. That said, I don't think it was executed very well. While a 3-way struggle could have worked, the stage itself is sort of underwhelming? I mean, from a visual standpoint, it's perfect. The background having these dark purple clouds chaotically swirling all over the place that are a great setting for the tone of this fight, a fight over reality itself. The ground being covered in giant patches of magenta crystals in contrast with the unnatural metallic orange floors, accompanied by these stadium lights that bear resemblance to Heavy King at their base. This stage isn't lacking in the aesthetics department. In fact, it excels there. However, I feel the design of the stage and mechanics of the fight itself leave more to be desired. Think back to the Doomsday Zone. A long stretch of void scattered with asteroids that slows you down and paths of rings to help keep you in your super state while you're chasing down Eggman. The rings were placed in such a way that left it down to the player's memorization of the stage to stay in their super form. Knowing where there were rings to be found and asteroids to avoid allowed someone skilled enough to snag as many rings as they needed before they actually went on to fight Eggman. But then you go over to Egg Reverie and it throws you directly into the fight with 50 rings in hand. No real build-up in gameplay, but that's fine. The cutscene beforehand established that this was going to be a 3-way struggle. The problem I have here actually involves the rings. They're just sort of flying everywhere. Maybe it contributes to the chaotic feel of the fight, sure, but from a practicality standpoint, they're leaving ring collecting up to RNG here. And the original recordings I did when getting footage and taking notes for this video, I legitimately had to restart a couple of times because of bad RNG. And okay, I'm willing to chalk that up to a classical nuggin skill issue. That's fair, but the possibility of bad luck unfairly ending a fight here should have seriously been taken into consideration. And yeah, it's likely that it was. I'm well aware of those hidden assets that seem to indicate that there was more of a stage here, possibly meaning that what we got was a result of deadlines closing in. It sucks, but it is what it is, I suppose. Moving onward to Supersonic himself, his controls have been modified ever so slightly. He feels alright to control while flying, a little heavy, a little bit slippery, and you can actually land this time around, able to start flying again by double jumping. Of course, he also has a dash activated by pressing the jump button while flying, just like in Sonic 3. This time, however, it isn't as helpful as it was back in Sonic 3. I mean, yeah, it lets you get in another lick on Heavy King or Eggman, but it comes at the cost of 5 rings. In a zone where staying in your super form is necessary for survival, and getting rings is up to the hand of fate, while also fighting the same bosses that are some of the few bosses in the entire series that can actually damage Sonic while he's in his super form. I'm sure I don't have to spell it out for you. There's a lot of problems with how the fight is actually designed. I don't want to dash since it decreases my time limit. Maybe I'd want to if I had been able to accumulate rings, but that's also a no-go. And in one of the few bosses that can actually drain your ring count in a stage where losing your super form means death, I want to keep as many rings on me as possible, just in case one of the bosses actually lands a hit. I mean, I like the visuals here. I love how Heavy King and Eggman look, Heavy King being heavily modified to utilize the power of the Phantom Ruby, and Eggman's vehicle being hastily put together, almost like it was fashioned out of scrap metal. I also like how they play different roles, Eggman attempting to stall Sonic and Heavy King attempting to attack Sonic. All things considered, the boss isn't bad at all, however I do think that it could have been better. A little more time in the oven would have done Egg Reverie and the final boss some good. Eventually, Sonic lands the final blow on Heavy King and Eggman, being forced away from the Chaos Emeralds by the Ruby. As the Emeralds scatter, a portal opens up, taking Sonic and the Phantom Ruby to places unknown. So that was Sonic Mania. It's an amazing game, and while not flawless, it's certainly on the verge of perfecting the classic Sonic formula. Yeah, the references can come off as heavy-handed, potentially alienating some players who haven't played a single Sonic game in their life. However, I don't think that not knowing all of the little references make the game unplayable. If it's not the best classic Sonic game, then it's certainly not far off from being the best. Yeah, the story's messy. Yeah, some of the bosses can drag on a little. And yes, the references can sometimes become intrusive. But overall, Sonic Mania is so great that it's enough to get people to shout encore. And on July 17th, 2018, an encore is exactly what we got. The Encore Mode DLC, otherwise known as the Plus DLC or Sonic Mania Plus, is a small expansion to the original game, remixing the base game zones with both new layouts and new color palettes to keep things fresh. On top of that, it added new gameplay mechanics and two characters who hadn't been seen in over 20 years at the time, Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel. The story picks up pretty much where Mania Mode left off, with Sonic and the Phantom Ruby showing back up on Angel Island once again. After exploring the island for a bit, Sonic finds a capsule with Mighty and Ray trapped inside. Upon busting it open and going over to one of them, the other reveals itself to be Heavy Magician, who snags the Phantom Ruby, using it to repair the other hard-boiled heavies. Now, Sonic must rescue Mighty, Ray, Tails, and Knuckles while chasing after Eggman and the hard-boiled heavies once again. Yeah, the story's about what I expected for a $5 DLC. Really, it's just an excuse to get Sonic and company moving through remixed versions of Mania zones. I remember being a little disappointed when I realized that Plus didn't add any new zones. I mean, I was still happy getting it solely for the fact that two characters who hadn't been seen in literal decades outside of references were finally playable with their own abilities. Having said that, let's talk about those two. Mighty and Ray, the characters that have a similar relationship to Sonic and Tails and have been out of action since this game's release. Gameplay-wise, Mighty's geared more so towards beginners, his hammer drop ability being used for uncovering goodies and offense more than anything. However, when he's curled up, he'll also reflect projectiles like he has an elemental shield, and he's mostly immune to spikes when curled. I also believe that how many times he can bounce on spikes depends on how fast you were going before landing on one, which is pretty neat. As for Ray, he can fly, but it's not like Tails' flight. Ray's works more like the cape from Super Mario World, rocking the D-pad back and forth with the right rhythm to gain height and speed. If you know where to use this ability, you can go real fast and real high. A higher skill setting for this guy, I'd imagine. You can also curl out of gliding, but you won't be able to glide again until you land. Overall, not bad abilities for characters who haven't seen the light of day for about 20 years at the time. Would love to see them in a new game, classic or modern. As for Encore Mode itself, it swaps out the life system for a partner system. You can swap freely between the two leaders using their respective abilities. If you die, your buddy takes over and the next in line takes up the partner slot, while the character you died as now has to be rescued in order to play as them again. If you have a character in reserve that you want to play as, just find one of these swap monitors and the character who broke it will be sent to the back of the line, with whoever was in the front of the reserve line at the time the monitor was broken being the character you now play as. A little confusing when I say it out loud, maybe I'm doing a crummy job at explaining it, but it makes a lot more sense in practice. Of course, if you want to randomize your characters, you can also find these question mark Sonic monitors that do exactly that. Now, admittedly, while I did play the game mostly as Mighty and Ray since Encore mode stages had segments designed with their abilities in mind, I did find the mechanic really enjoyable. Being able to switch between two playable characters is inherently a really cool idea, but needing to switch up my mindset and route whenever I lost a character and thinking about how I'm going to get them back is genuinely incredible. It was a mechanic I wasn't expecting to like all that much, but it actually added some variety to a mode whose stages were already remixed in several ways. As for how you actually rescue characters, you can either go through the pinball bonus stage or bust open one of these monitors that are cycling through the extra life icons of the remaining characters. Guess it wouldn't be a Sonic game without some form of gambling. To be honest, your best bet is the pinball bonus stage, since you know exactly who you're gonna get and can rescue everyone in bulk. Honestly, while it does sort of cheese the mechanics of the game, I think it works pretty well. Of course, the special stages have seen some remixing alongside the normal levels, becoming quite a bit more challenging. Not that that's a bad thing either. I found the added challenge to be incredibly fun and seriously rewarding. I was legitimately on the edge of my seat, hyper-focused on getting the emeralds. Some of these jumps are really tight, and you seriously have to master balancing, collecting rings, and blue spheres in the new set of special stages. And that covers everything I could think of when it came to Encore mode. Not bad for a DLC with a $5 price tag in my opinion. The new color palettes and level designs are pretty solid, Mighty and Ray are a great duo, the mechanics are great, and yeah. I'm not gonna bother going over the ending. It's basically the same as the ending in Mania mode with the addition of seeing the classic gang hang out in Mirage Saloon Zone at the end. It's a nice touch. I can't recall the last time we saw the characters just chill out for a moment in the games. So yeah, that was Sonic Mania Plus. Would I recommend that you start here if you're looking to get into the Sonic series? Maybe. While Sonic Mania almost perfects the classic Sonic formula, it's ultimately a game targeted towards fans like me, people who grew up with the Sonic series, and as such, I can only really fully see it through the eyes of a fan. The eyes of a person who was able to point and go, hey, I get that. On top of that, when the game's slogan is effectively by fans, for fans, it's a hard recommendation as an entry title to the Sonic series. For that reason, just by a hair, I'd still recommend Sonic 3 and Knuckles or Sonic 2 as an entry point to the Sonic series over Sonic Mania. That said, I'd still say that Sonic Mania is quite possibly the best classic Sonic game we're gonna get. No questions asked. It's not perfect, no game is. Personally, I find the references to all of the previous classic Sonic games to be really endearing as a fan. But I can also acknowledge that if you're a newcomer, you're gonna be a little confused here and there. You're probably not gonna get all the new references, but you're likely still gonna have a great time. And yeah, sometimes the references get quite intrusive. Chemical Plant, Hydrocity, and Metallic Madness are quite heavy-handed with the references, and sometimes the pacing is broken a bit by the bosses. But when push comes to shove, Sonic Mania is a spectacular game. Amazing gimmicks, fluid animations, stellar visuals, speedy stages, this game has it all. All of this for roughly $25 on Steam, the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation 4, or the Xbox One as of 2024. Of course, you could also just snag a Netflix account and play it on mobile, but I seriously wouldn't recommend it. It's riddled with lag, audio issues, and just poor controls all around. Seriously, stick to the PC or console versions for your own sake. With all of that said, what am I working on next? Man, I don't fucking know right now, dude. It's November right now. I wanted to get this video done months ago, only to be trapped outside of my own dimension, and I have had one hell of a time. Fuck the ending bit. I'm going to bed.